Hey everybody, Tom Barnes, stories from the 78, and the 78 being all the way out in Maine. And that's where I have my friend Jonathan here. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm great, Tom. How are you?
Yeah, you wrote this new incredible book with your partner, George, your writing partner there, In a Whole New Way.
Yep.
And it deals, or it sheds some light on the criminal justice system here in America, specifically though the probation portion of it, the probationary period. Why don't you expand on that a little bit and what the book, because there also is conjunction with the documentary as well.
That's right. Yeah. Well, probation is it's the dominant slice of the pie in terms of American correctional supervision. There are more people on probation in this country than on parole, jail, or in prison combined. And yet very few know about it. It's like the unknown dominant part of American criminal justice. And we're newbies to the field ourselves, for that matter. What we are, the way this whole thing got started, Tom, is George, back in 2010, he started a nonprofit called Seeing for Ourselves. And the aim of that nonprofit was to equip and train marginalized people to take control of their own public narrative by documenting their lives photographically. It's called participatory photography, which has roots, I think, in 1992 among American aid workers in rural China. They were the ones who developed it, and it's been growing in popularity ever since. Our first application of the nonprofit's practice, when I joined in 2010 as well, was in the housing projects of New York City. And that led to a book. It got widely noticed, more to the point it actually led the city and New York City and state to resume funding of the housing projects, which they had previously backed away from. So that kind of proved the efficacy of this practice and what George's nonprofit was all about. And so then New York City, which knew about the success better than anyone else because they were so intimately involved, they said, okay, guys, you proved your practice, you proved the concept in the housing projects of New York City. Can you please take your practice down to 33 Beaver Street, which is where in New York City, which is where the New York City Department of Probation is headquartered? Because people on probation have, like the people on housing projects, been laboring under negative stereotypes promulgated by the media over the last generation. And, in the case of people on probation, this kind of mocking media coverage where probation was treated as a slap on the wrist, if not a joke, it really handicapped efforts of those on probation to kind of straighten out their lives. So I think the city thought that we can kind of turn that whole syndrome around, and while imparting a marketable skill. And so in January of 2018, after we got an NEA grant, we found ourselves embedded at the New York City Department of Probation. And that's when our programming began, which led to all of that.
Right. So in this book, you've armed people with, or they had cameras and they documented this process that is the probationary period. Why do you think there's so many people that are on probation or in that holding staging area, if you will, than there are anything else in the criminal justice system?
In a way, you could say it's a good thing. I mean, it's certainly better than some of the alternatives. But unfortunately, what happened as a result of the crime wave in 1972, 1992 is that probation lost its rehabilitative roots. It was originally founded by a bootmaker of all people in Boston in 1841 as a way.
That's where it started.
That's where it started. Yeah,
in Boston, and
that's right. Wow. That's right. And like so many innovations, it came from somebody completely outside the field. I mean, this bootmaker had no experience of criminal justice. He just happened to be in police court one day and saw a drunkard about to be sentenced by a judge to to several weeks or several months in prison. And he intervened with the judge and said, look, why don't you give this guy to me for a few weeks? I'll return him, in a few weeks, and let's see where we are. And lo and behold, when John Augustus, that was the bootmaker's name, came back to court with the no longer drunkard, a few weeks later, his life was transformed, and that in effect was the start of probation.
That's unbelievable. I never knew that.
Yeah, people do. John Augustus he figured out everything. That there was going to be an investigation, there was going to be an intake, there was going to be a report, and there was going to be follow-up. And the practice was eventually institutionalized in Massachusetts in 1878. And for a century, it kept up with John Augustus's really rehabilitative aims. But then, there was this crime wave in 1972, 1992. And under the impetus of that, probation turned punitive in jurisdictions across the country. And folks on probation, they wound up pinballing between probation and prison constantly, tripped up by dozens and dozens of stipulations that would be impossible for anybody to adhere to, let alone somebody who came from a deprived environment. And at the same time, it was sort of ironic, but that's exactly when the media treatment of probation began to turn hostile and mocking, treating probation as a slap on the wrist, even as it turned punitive at that very time. So it's a very strange confluence of events. Anyway,
so well, go ahead.
Probation, as the crime wave ended, in the 90s, jurisdictions around the country gradually began to return to the original rehabilitative aims of the practice. Nowhere more than New York, which actually became the industry leader. And so it's so fortunate that we were embedded there. And so they no longer violate people for kind of Mickey Mouse violations of probation. They give advance warning of these heretofore unannounced home visits, when probation officials would just come charging through your door. They've instituted a whole range of arts programs, recognizing that the rehabilitative nature of the arts in terms of criminal justice. You could see why there are arts programs in prisons. Well, the arts programs now in probation as well. And so in the jurisdictions like New York City, probation is being practiced effectively, and it really does constitute an alternative to locking people up. We lead the planet in locking up our own people.
Right.
It would be great to get away from that. But in some jurisdictions, encouraged by this media treatment of probation, the practice does remain punitive, unfortunately. And so that's what our involvement is trying to upend, trying to change this whole syndrome, that we feel that if we can create a positive view of probation through the photographs taken by the New Yorkers on probation, that can encourage jurisdictions that are still punitive to return to the original rehabilitative roots of the practice, which could lead to a more positive view taken by the media of probation, which could, the end all of all this is that effective probation could be viewed more widely as an alternative to locking people up.
Right, because yeah, I mean, if we're just throwing away the problem and it's not really helping anything. And people who are coming out who have been rehabilitated, and then you give them the tools to succeed once they leave. I mean, that's kind of the whole point, is to get them back into a productive member of society, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so, the folks who went through a program, they didn't all become professional photographers, but several of them did, and they got jobs at the probation department, actually teaching the courses that we initiated there. Some of the best students were taken on as teachers, and that helped them enormously.
Right, and then I imagine just doing the practice of going out and showing, a day in the life. Here's what we're doing. It gets people thinking. It gets people innovating with different ideas. Like, yes, the photography is there just because that's the main medium at the moment. But I'm sure other people discovered other things by pushing themselves to just, find alternatives to, better themselves, to get out of this probationary period where they can just be right in, back to their old lives, if you will, with completely rehabilitated or at least educated to different ways of making ends meet.
That's right, Tom. Yeah, that's it exactly. Yep. And
well, I mean, the
photography, we think, is kind of lends itself to the feeling, to giving people control in the sense that everybody has their own perspective. You know, I mean, it's true of all the arts. I mean, you could write a poem a different way, you can paint a painting, a picture another way, but there's something about the camera and the lenses and the choices that everybody makes, and the fact that with a little instruction and the right equipment, everybody could take a great picture. You know, it's
Yeah,
not like,
isn't that
it's
amazing?
not, you know, it's not like painting in that sense. It's not like poetry in that sense. Really, everybody we found with training and the right equipment can take a great picture and expressing their own viewpoint through their own
Exactly,
of the
expression.
lenses. Yes, absolutely.
Uh,
And what it seems to have done, you know, which we discovered this in our program, is that it, you know, it's okay. We learned that photography, of course, is not just about you know, taking pretty pictures. It's not even as we might have supposed a way of upending a misleading public narrative. It actually could be a way to change your life. And you know, that's what I think people, you know, that's what our film tried to show, people saying exactly that. That, you know, it changed my life. It just gave me more control, more. I realized I could, you know, I could try to interpret the environment my own way.
yeah, and it's a form of expression, you know, and that a form of expression and creativity is mental health, which
Yes.
is intertwined in all that, and that's documented in the documentary and also the book in a whole new way. And is the documentary out yet? I was
Oh
reading
yeah,
is it PBS?
yeah. We sent it out into the film festival circuit in 2021. So it played the festivals over the last couple of years, and it's done, you know, astonishingly well. Which, I mean, we really were surprised by the folks in South Sudan. You know, really,
Oh wow.
you know, gave this an award as the best social film of the festival. I mean, who would have thought, right? But people all over the world have gravitated to this tale. I think, you know, you know, it's partly because of the charismatic nature of the participants in the program, and partly because of the photography that's in the film, partly because it shows New York City, partly because it's about America. I mean, there's all these kinds of reasons, but nevertheless, and also it's about American probation. I think they recognize that this country really did something good by innovating in this criminal justice arena and developing that practice, which now we think could be an alternative to locking people up. So we're, you know, the film has found fans on the right and the left, and that was kind of intentional on our part, because you know, you feel you do have to have a bipartisan approach if you're going to reform criminal justice in this country. So
Yeah, to say the least,
yeah,
right?
yes, exactly,
And
absolutely.
America loves second chance stories too, you know, and
Yes,
for a lot of these folks, it's a second chance. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's done something stupid in their lives, you know, some bigger than others. But even on a small scale, when you know you do something, you want a second chance to make it better. This is the other extreme. You know, people are truly, you know, remorseful, whatever they did, and they want that second chance. They should be allowed to have it if, you know, if they do everything that qualifies them to do that.
and America itself is a second chance. I mean, how fitting is that? You know, I
Right.
mean, and then New York City has been called the capital, America's capital of second chances. So all, you know, all these things kind of, you know, built on each other.
All ties together. For people who want more information about the book and where to buy it and anything else that you guys are doing, what's the best way to do that?
In a whole new way.com. That's our website. And you can find out about the book. You can find out about the film. You can watch the film for a nominal fee and learn all about it. And we'd love to have visitors.
It has been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your summer, what's left of it, and fall up there in Cape Elizabeth. It's a great place to be.
And we love Chicago. Tom, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Take care.